Paul with Silas set off now from Antioch, and they're going to head back to Derbe and Lystra. And they're doing so because Paul and Barnabas, who now have split, had agreed that it was a good idea to go back and see what had taken root from their early missionary journey. And on that first missionary journey, believers had been established, congregations had come into being. And they're going back, and the thing to see here is that Paul, one of the premier apostles, is also very pastorally minded. Let's go find out, let's go strengthen, let's go encourage. Simple point. In Acts chapter 6, we had seen those set aside to wait at tables. And yet God had taken two of them, Stephen and Philip, and blown their doors off and expanded their ministry. It's not a good idea simply to say, well, I do this, and then put the barriers up when God says, and I want you to do this in addition to what you think you do. So now they're travelling together, Paul, the apostle, Silas with this huge prophetic ministry, and they come upon Timothy, a younger man in the faith, a man who was the son of a Jewish woman and a believer, but father a Greek. And Paul is going to come to him and say, you, Timothy, you younger man, leave your town, take the cost, and follow with me together the leading of the Lord. Timothy now is being changed in his understanding of discipleship. Remember the disciples in the early days, leaving nets and following. That's our call. What do we leave behind? Everything. What do we gain? Everything. It's an exchange. And so Paul does something to Timothy which is going to hurt him. He has him circumcised. Not, of course, as in Acts 15, not of course to authenticate salvation, but because in the days ahead, this will allow Timothy to function in a missionary situation amongst the Jews. Sometimes we must do things that will be costly, not for our sake, but for the sake of mission. And so the churches are strengthened and they increase in numbers. And now as they continue, and we're about to hit into Europe, they come to a place in Galatia. And as you read verses 6 to 10, we find something extraordinary, but is often true in our experience. You've got an apostle, you've got a prophet, you've got a called out one in Timothy, you've got this whole apostolic team, and Paul is seeking God. How do we break on through? How do we take new ground? We've strengthened churches. And as they try and they look around, they know God guides, but all they're getting is negative guidance. And you cannot blame the devil for that. It actually will say in verse 7 that they try to go to certain places and the Spirit of Jesus won't allow them. And then, one night, in a vision, so he's awake, Paul gets this vision of a man in Macedonia. Come over and help us. And they talk about it as a team, and they go. And immediately we sought to go, concluding that God had called us there also. Europe's about to open. We'd struggled, everything was closed. And now from our viewpoint, suddenly God is opening. That's not a suddenly that God had. It's a suddenly that we experience.